Hello, everybody. Good evening. It's already evening. Thank you so much for being patient. Today, I had some things to do, and so I'm coming up at 5 p.m. ish live. And my name is Olga, known as OnestPress across the socials. Welcome back. We're going to talk about the global and national news with a deep dive on everything that does happen in Ukraine. Certainly, I have three topics for today. First is war gains. This will be about Russian breakthrough in Donetsk and Pokrovsk region of Ukraine. Also about food cuts and millions to lose SNAP benefits under Trump's new law and market shakeups. US China extended their tariff pause. Trump nominates new BLS critic, somebody related to Heritage Foundation, and how this will affect the probability of the data and also the truthfulness of the data that we will be having coming out on this Friday. So, thank you so much for joining. Let's begin with some major headlines. And as always, please comment, please ask questions. I really want you to be part of this conversation and us have, this good time together. So, thank you so much for being here. Hey, Jared, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being flexible and for being here. All right, so major headlines. First, federal operation is launched in DC. Dozens have been arrested yesterday. So, yesterday morning, 40 minutes late, but nevertheless, President Trump came up to the White House podium at the press conference room and declared that he's essentially taking, Washington, D.C., the capital, under the federal control. And so he promised, the National Guard to be stepping into the streets of Washington, D.C. in the next couple of weeks. But in fact, it was in the next couple of hours. We saw the video of National Guard stepping into and arriving in Washington, D.C. 800 troops have been deployed. And so following the federal government's announcement takeover of Washington, D.C., law enforcement launched this operation making D.C. safe and beautiful. Right? This very optimistic saying reminds me on when I, as a kid, was touring the concentration camps and they said, hard work will set you free, right? Everything is so positive and beautiful and wonderful. Meanwhile, we're stepping into fascism with both feet. The White House reported that in one night, multi-agency task forces arrested 37 individuals, seized 11 illegal firearms, and issued 4 narcotics charges. Reports also surfaced of federal officers conducting random traffic stops near Harvard University. Of course, they want to start with HBCU, raising concerns about the operation's scope and impact on civil liberties. I think we're past the question of raising concerns. They literally were stopping people on the streets. This is not my video, so I will not be sharing it here. But if you subscribe to our free newsletter right here, the website is zooming right here. It's honestnetwork.com, ONEST network.com, where you can read it on Substack. It's free every day. There I will present some videos on that, right? So National Guard arriving, but also people being, they call it sort of federal, what was it, like traffic stops, but it's not traffic stops. Nobody should be stopped and asked for their documents and their legality if all they go is just to a university campus in the middle of Washington, D.C. Hey, Michael, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Hey, Martha. Martha says, late, but glad I'm catching you live. Always look forward to these newscasts. Thank you. Thank you so much. I always look forward to seeing you guys here. Hey, Brad. Yes, caring people have always been a way to terrify people. Yes, ID. And that's, I think, the main goal here, right? To make us being scared to live our lives to the fullest, right? Or live our lives as we used to. If you have National Guard positioned all over the streets in your city, probably you will think twice. Shall I go to that, place? Shall I run this errand? Shall I step out of the house late at night, for a dinner with my friends? Or maybe shall I just stay at home? Because who knows, right? And so this is the idea, to scare us to live very consciously, to check the news before we do anything, to check Truth Social before we do anything, right? And then they have these press briefings that are very scary. They're fear mongering on steroids. Today, we also had another press conference with the White House, Speaker Carolyn Levitt. Everything is scary. Everything is very aggressive. So for that reason, we need to distinguish what are the facts and what are the feelings, right? Because the feelings are a response, right? Naturally, it's our response to all this fear mongering and all this aggression that we're facing on the daily. And this is part of that, so to speak, reality show that this administration is producing. So let's not be, taking those roles that we were never applied for, right? Let's not be cast as part of this reality show, sort of like Truman Show. Let's draw a distinction. This is fact, and this is some hoopla hop propaganda. Okay? So, now, of course, the meeting between Trump and Putin is looming upon us. It will be on this Friday. Last night, I received my invitation to join Trump to Alaska. And because of that, I will be sharing some details. We're going to discuss this meeting. I was advised by several news channels not to go because there's some security concerns, which I will talk about in a second once we talk about this specific meeting. But prior to the meeting, obviously, European leaders are trying to speak to Trump. And they're using different methods, right? They're releasing, of course, statements. The G7 released a statement yesterday. I was talking about it yesterday, but also they're calling Trump. They're calling Zelensky. Zelensky's calling Trump. Zelensky's right hand traveled to England to meet with J.D. Vance, who is vacationing in England. So at this point, they're trying to talk sense into Trump not to make any deal without Ukraine. This is the main narrative, right? Any single readout I'm reading, whether I'm reading it from the side of the UK and Germany and Netherlands, or the Ukrainian side or European Union side, all they want to do is to explain to Donald Trump that he cannot make a deal about Ukraine without Ukraine being present, because that will lead to Ukraine not accepting that deal. Because obviously Zelensky needs congressional, right? It's Rada, but it's sort of Congress, so to speak, in Ukraine. He needs this approval, congressional approval of any changes to the borders of Ukraine, of sovereign Ukraine that has been, the borders that have been defined in 1991. This is not something that Zelensky can decide on a whim, and he is not such president to do so. So in that regard, Trump can make that, whatever type of deals he wants to make with Putin, but it doesn't mean that Ukraine will be playing along, nor European leaders. So European leaders welcome Trump's efforts to end Russia's war in Ukraine and stress that any peace must respect international law, Ukraine's sovereignty, and territorial integrity, meaning stick to 1991 borders, okay? So they emphasize that Ukraine must decide its own future and that peace negotiations require a ceasefire or reduced hostilities. That war's broader threat to European and global security was acknowledged, and that EU pledged continued support to Ukraine across all sectors, including military aid and sanctions on Russia. The EU also reiterated its commitment to Ukraine's future European Union membership and emphasized the importance of security guarantees. Now, this is to European Union. And don't forget to hit the like. Yes, thank you so much, Doug. Thank you and welcome. Don't forget to hit like outside the chat. Yes, please do so. If you can like and subscribe and share this just for the algorithm to recommend it to more folks, this would be wonderful. Regardless which platform you're watching it on, either it is Substack or X or YouTube, please do so. I would be very, very much appreciative. So now, what European Union is also doing is preparing the 19th package of sanctions. 18th package has been approved. They pretty much restricted travel for, of course, billionaires and gazillionaires of Russia, but also those close to Putin. Right? So, European Commission Vice President Kaja Kallas announced that the EU is preparing a 19th round of sanctions against Russia in response to its continued refusal to agree to a full and unconditional ceasefire in Ukraine. Kallas firmly stated that no concessions should be discussed while Russia maintains its aggressive stance. And she's very outspoken. She also mentioned that it doesn't really make sense to negotiate with Putin, who's really not interested in making any moves. He is on the offensive. He's actually winning land in Ukraine as of recent. So for him, what he's interested in, and I explained that yesterday as well, he's interested in a ceasefire that will be specifically when it comes to strikes, when aerial ceasefire would be in effect, then his oil facilities or his facilities in general in Russia would be safe, because that is what Ukraine is targeting on the daily, right? What Ukraine would be winning in that case is, yes, civilians would be suffering less, right? Unless Russia would be violating this ceasefire. But that would benefit Putin, because he would be pausing, and just gathering and amassing more power to go further into Ukraine and also expand the conflict and occupation. Also, what we need to know that if Russia were to keep the land, the so-called land swap that Trump is advocating for and the entire Trump administration is advocating for, is that Putin will be holding very strategic parts of Ukraine. When it comes to the access to the Black Sea, no, it's not an ocean that Trump refers to, it's Black Sea, but it's very important strategically place for Russia to hold on to, because that essentially gives them access to, for the naval forces, gives access to Ukraine, but also in close cooperation to Turkey and other parts, right? So just grab a map and check what Black Sea is and where it is. Also, when it comes to northern Ukraine and eastern Ukraine, this is strategic for him as well, because from there he can go further. He can go, he had station his troops there if he were to keep this land, right? He can also force Ukrainians and Ukrainian men who live there to fight on behalf of Russia. He can also use, of course, Belarus as much as he's using now, but even more, and then expand to the Baltics, and then expand to Moldova. So those parts of land are not just, by chance there. They were occupied because they're very strategically important and favored by Russia. So, Trump, of course, yesterday delivered his comments. He was talking about DC, and then he produced this type of statements that are, clueless. If I were to be kind, right, to everything he says, it's quite interesting that President of the United States is clueless, or they're pretty much evil, if we were to consider him actually knowing what he's talking about. So I give him the benefit of doubt. But he was referring to Crimea, right, on the Black Sea. Quote, Russia has occupied some very prime territory. They have taken largely, in real estate, we call it oceanfront property. That's always the most valuable property. Ukraine was largely 1,000 miles of ocean. That's gone. First of all, there is no ocean. There's Black Sea. And Putin is less interested in putting, Putin towers or, golf resorts or Mar-a-Lago like, type of construction in Crimea. He's interested to use it as his naval base. And so, yeah. Then Trump was referring to Kiev. And remember how the war started? Perhaps you can recall February 22nd, well, it was 23rd already in Ukraine. Russia invaded Ukraine, and they pretty much wanted to seize Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, within few hours. And they went that far as to give this type of schedule to Russian forces, where they said, well, occupy Kiev within this and this many hours, then launch than victory parade. And these forces arrived with the attire for victory parade. That's how delusional these people were. In fact, Ukrainians fought from day one, from the first minute, right? We saw these videos where grandmas were using, like cans of food to just strike drones and everything that they could, right? And hit the Russians that were occupying their cities. People were fighting with anything in hand. So, and of course, Ukrainian forces were fighting, and of course, they were using the javelins that at that point Trump, sent to Ukraine during his first term. But just to say that Ukraine and Kiev could have been occupied within hours is just so delusional that it's very upsetting to hear. But here's a quote. He says, the Russians would have been in Kiev in 4 hours if they went down in highway. But a Russian general decided to go through farmland. And that's what prohibited them from occupying Kiev. Give me a goddamn break, please. They were not going through farmland. They were not going to, so they're supposed to just go into the city and occupy the city, but they use farmland. I hope, honestly, I hope he's clueless. Because if he is, I was just checking AC. If it's too loud, please let me know. I'm just trying not to suffocate because it's very hot in New York right now. I just hope he's joking. I just hope he's clueless because if he's not, I mean, do we have a case of physical inability to understand things, to maintain things, just disinterest in facts? Horrible. Now, former Lithuanian foreign minister, who is head of a think tank at this point, he wrote an article today openly slamming Western leaders over Ukraine. He titled it with "This is on us." And so Gabrielis Landsbergis, former foreign minister of Lithuania, issued a blistering critique of Western leaders' response to Russia's war in Ukraine. In a strongly worded statement, he argued that if Ukraine's forced to accept de facto occupation, it would be a result and direct result of Western failure, not Ukrainian. Quote, if Ukraine has no choice but to accept de facto occupation, that's because we failed. He accused the West of ignoring warnings, repeating historical mistakes, and avoiding the hard choices necessary to uphold peace and democratic values. Landsbergis also condemned Dutch former Prime Minister, now head of NATO, Mark Rutte's suggestion that long-term outcomes might mirror the eventual liberation of the Baltic states. Quote, Rutte is revealing that the latest genius 5D chess move to save Ukraine is to casually throw millions of people into a black hole of oppression, torture, rape, kidnapping, murder, and destruction of national identity, de facto, but not de jure. Calling the rationale literally sickening, Landsbergis warned against using the Baltic experience under Soviet occupation as a model for Ukraine's future. And then he described, how the Baltic occupation happened. Well, if you think about it, on the map, it would make sense. If you're fighting, let's just seize part of your land and just live happily ever after. But if you ask what actually did happen there and how people were tortured and how they lived under occupation, same as how Ukrainians live under occupation right now in those parts of land that Trump suggests to swap with Russia, you would be sickened, right? If we hear the stories how journalists are tortured, but also how people are tortured, men are tortured. I'm not going to go into details because I'll be banned from all the social media platforms, but just know that parts of their bodies are cut, they're being tortured, they're being of course, raped and assaulted in many ways, men and women and kids and everybody. It doesn't mean that the land that is under Russian occupation, that they live happily ever after, they go to work, okay, they have Russian passports, but everything else is just good. No, it's not. So, as to Zelensky, in his national address, Zelensky warned that Russian President Putin is not preparing for a ceasefire or peace, but rather intensifying military efforts. Citing reports from Ukrainian intelligence and military command, Zelensky said, quote, Putin is determined only to present a meeting with America as his personal victory and then continue acting exactly as before, applying the same pressure on Ukraine as before, end quote. I would also add that Putin is not planning to meet with Zelensky. Every time you hear these reports that Trump is working so hard to have this meeting with Putin and Zelensky, just know that this is bogus. First of all, nobody's working on it. Second of all, Putin will not agree to that because for that he needs to recognize Ukraine as a sovereign state and Zelensky as an equal individual, equal leader that he would need to negotiate with. He has no respect for Ukraine, no respect for Zelensky, nor he is recognizing him as a legitimate leader because it's past the elections in Ukraine and those that were postponed and canceled because of the war. So for him, he is not interested. So all this blah, 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 as I explained yesterday, perhaps there are different intentions of Trump and Putin to meet, to close some type of deals. I would think this is concerning the Arctic because that is what where Putin's interest lies. Yes, Trump can start negotiating, maybe making Russia part of the Golden Dome. We can go as crazy as that because if somebody is physically unable to understand how geography works, how international law works, how diplomacy works, expect the unexpected. Because how many times in the past 6 months you thought, oh my God, I never thought, but hey, here we are. So, well, people in Alaska are not happy about this Putin-Trump meeting. So pro-Ukraine rallies planned in Anchorage. Pro-Ukraine rally will be there on the 14th of August. It's called Alaska Opposes Tyranny. The rally aims to protest what organizers call the presence of an international war criminal and to demonstrate solidarity of Ukraine. Now, what we do know. What I know, because I got my invitation to join the press thing. Side note, the invitation was hella weird. I have no other words to describe it. I've been at President Biden's pool. I've traveled. I've covered events, NATO events, UN, G7, G20, you name it, state visits at the White House, elsewhere, overseas. I've covered it. I've never received any type of email from White House travel service. I'm not going to reveal much, right? Because then you can guess their emails. But they always would say, this is the cost, this is the estimation. Yes, press and journalists are paying for travel, especially on Air Force One. They're paying for travel, they're paying for food, they're paying for hotels, of course, for the shuttles, everything that is needed. This is, and by the way, we pay, if we fly on Air Force One, we pay equivalent to a double or triple price of a business class ticket. So we kind of sponsor the group that is flying with the president. But okay, this is on a side note. What we always know is the cost, right? Here, the invitation was agree to go. And in 12 hours, the door closes to agree. And then we will tell you what it will cost you. And once you agreed, you cannot cancel your trip. You cannot escape this cost. No matter if you go or not, you will be paying. It's a very interesting thing, right? It opens the door for every channel to outbid the other channel. It opens the door for favorable fees or a fee extra charge to be favored or whatnot. I've never seen it. This is weird. I spoke to different channels. Everybody thought, it's a very interesting thing. In addition, what we know is that the press headquarters will be in Anchorage, probably at the U.S. Air Force Base, which then raised questions as to, is Trump and Putin meeting on U.S. Air Force Base, right? And just understand that before Putin or any other leader meets the other in a spot that is not their country, their Secret Service and their intelligence, industry will be I mean, checking every single person, every single, meter of wherever they're meeting and around, right? So essentially, the FSB, right, the Secret Service or the intelligence of Russians would be granted access to our Air Force base. Kind of weird. Then some reports came out from some channels of those that are going there that most likely Putin and Trump will be meeting on an island in the Bering Sea, which is Russian territory. So when Trump was saying yesterday that I'm going to Russia to meet with Putin, this is not because he's probably not that he is suffering dementia and doesn't know where Alaska is, or that he sold Alaska for a dime to Putin. He physically would be going to meet in Russia, which raised for me a very high level of concern. I'm US citizen, I'm also Ukrainian citizen, so I report on Putin the way I report on Putin. So for me, being checked by FSB and all that type of stuff, not looking forward to it. Anything can also happen because they feed you, you get the point, right? So, in that case, if they are meeting on this tiny island in the Bering Sea in between Russia and America, right, essentially Alaska, who will be there? How many reporters will be in the room? Who will be allowed, right? Will those reporters be Chinese, Russian, North Korean, and Newsmax and Fox News? Probably. Will there be any channels that are liberal and democratic? Most likely not. Of course, we're going to get a news feed. There will be, and by the way, that whole situation was as to you will be attending the press briefing, whatever, and there will be extended opportunity for coverage. What that means is also weird. This is also something we've never seen. From reporters and coming from the White House before a major meeting. Also, those meetings are usually organized weeks in advance. We can never talk about it. This is the email that is also not to be talked about. But that deadline has passed at 8:30 in the morning today. So, and the meeting is on Friday, and I'm not sharing any details that you can go ahead and look up. But I'm just painting the picture as to most likely this meeting will be actually on Russia's land, which again raises a huge question. Why are we meeting on enemy soil? Is it our enemy soil or is it our friends? Because then FSB and our FBI and CIA are working very close together. So, okay, now let's talk about, Steven says, two criminals getting together. What could go wrong? Michael says, this meeting will be a useless waste of time and expense. Yeah, that's what I agree. Yes, absolutely. So let's talk about Russia's offense advances in Donetsk that now raise concerns over Ukrainian defense. And this is something that is a bit tough to report on, given that, I got my parents out of Ukraine. I'm very much interested in Ukraine defending itself, specifically defending, the city where I was born and everything that my family owned there. And I mean, they bombed even graveyards of my grandparents. Like, it's sick. So, but we need to also be truthful and see if Ukraine messes up somewhere. We need to notice that as well. We cannot just say that everything that Ukraine and Zelensky does is wonderful. Everybody is human. Mistakes do happen. Mistakes do bring consequences. So, Russian forces have reportedly broken through part of the front line near the strategic logistics hub of Pokrovsk in eastern Ukraine, according to Ukrainian open source intelligence group. Ukraine's military has confirmed ongoing responses to intensified Russian offenses in the area, where Russian troops have been attempting to advance toward the city in recent weeks. This recent breakthrough near Zolotoy Kolodys has been described by experts as catastrophic for Ukrainian defenses. Stretching between 15 to 19 kilometers, the Russian advance is attributed to multiple factors, including inadequate Ukrainian command, the sheer volume of Russian resources committed, disorganized Ukrainian resistance, and the deployment of new Russian mobile units that bypass scattered Ukrainian defense points. Experts warn that this breakthrough threatens a significant tactical collapse, with the potential encirclement of the entire Donbas region, a central focus of Russian claims in negotiations. The pressure on Ukrainian defenses is compounded by advances near Liman, which together with Zolotoy Kolodys breakthrough forms a northern pincer movement against Ukrainian forces. In response to these developments, Ukraine has urgently redeployed the 92nd Assault Brigade from Kharkiv front and the 4th National Guard Rubish from Dobropilya to reinforce the critical sectors. Let's pause here. They're pulling forces now from Kharkiv region, from eastern Ukraine, that is also facing Russian advance. Russians are advancing in 4 different areas. In one area, they broke through, so Ukraine is pulling all the forces there, opening other 3. So, in addition, additional units whose details remain undisclosed due to strict operational security have also been mobilized. Military analysts suggest that Ukraine may need to consider strategic withdrawals from certain areas, such as Oskil Bridgehead, to shorten the front line and reallocate forces more effectively. However, such moves risk actually losing territory and granting Russia territorial gains and the organizational advantages that Ukrainian units have painstakingly developed. Now, meanwhile, Ukraine is also utilizing its elite Azov corps. These forces, of course, have been partially detained by Russia. Folks went back to into the fight. These are the most advanced forces that are most brutal, but also most intelligent in that case. They're using now Azov forces to deploy to Pokrovsk sector, where the situation is described as complex and dynamic, and Russian troops continue their determined push forward in the region, intensifying the pressure on Ukrainian defense lines. And so, does Trump play a role in this? Indirectly, yes. Ukraine hasn't been receiving aid as much as Biden did assign and allocate for Ukraine. Ukraine is receiving weapons, they're receiving, parts to fix the tanks and fix the systems that they owned prior. But they're not receiving Patriot systems. They're not receiving enough military aid that would allow them, first, to defend themselves, and second, to push Russians out. So, did Zelensky spend a lot of time on negotiating with Trump and with the international community and playing this, praise Trump and hope for the best type of theater? Meanwhile, not keeping an eye on what's really going on inside the forces and where they are and how strategically they're positioned. That's a question. Others are raising a question once General Zaluzhny was pushed out because he became too popular, and Zelensky was fearing that Zaluzhny would be running for president. He then was pushed as ambassador to the UK, which is, for the lack of better word, hella weird. Then the advances, the Russians were able to advance, and Syrskyi is not as successful at this point as much as Zaluzhny was. It's another question, but it is what it is. And at this point, this plays into the hands of Russians. This plays into the cards of Putin. When he is facing Trump and he will tell, look, we're actually going on and winning and whatever, I'm not interested in ceasefire because, I'm going to get more land in a week or 2 or 3. And this offensive was reported on. I reported on it a month ago. They were amassing 200,000 troops on the border of Ukraine, the eastern flank. This is not something that comes as a surprise. And the Russians said that their offensive is planned until September 1st or beginning of September because of the rain season and whatnot. So they need to be fast. Now, if we were to summarize what did happen, right, since Trump came into office, Ukraine agreed to negotiation, agreed to ceasefire, unconditional ceasefire, agreed to talks, attended talks, came to the White House, came to the G7, came everywhere. Now, when it comes to Russia, Russia didn't agree to anything. Putin has met with this real estate guy, Witkov, who completely misunderstood him for what? 5 times. The guy didn't bring his own translator. He used an FSB agent for translating. And then it comes out Witkov understood one thing, told Trump, Trump understood another thing, the second thing, and Putin actually met a third thing and didn't agree to anything. So while we're playing this reality show, entertaining and trying to win a Nobel Prize, Ukrainians are dying and will be dying even more. And this Landsbergis, the former foreign minister of Lithuania, is absolutely right. Where is European Union at this point? This is your part of the world. Where are you? But we're getting other reports that European Union is preparing for war. There are many signs for that. I'll have a readout in just a second. But I want to also mention what Trump's administration is saying, right? Or Trump's corner. Former retired General Keane explains that it's not Kane, it's Keane. Kane, I guess, is the current one. Explains that Putin seeks ceasefire only if Ukraine relinquishes the remaining parts of Donetsk and Luhansk, including a fort-filled belt of 5 cities that block access to Kharkiv, where I'm from. That's why I was saying it's tough to report on. Keane warns Putin would likely break any ceasefire just as before to gain a stronger position for further territorial seizures. He points out that under Ukraine's constitution, Zelensky cannot cede land without approval from Rada, which is parliament, and a national referendum, a safeguard mirrored in the US Constitution requiring congressional consent for territorial concessions, a detail many overlook. At a recent UK meeting involving US, European, and Ukrainian officials, a counter-proposal to Putin was formulated. The upcoming Alaska talks should start with a ceasefire only, without discussing territorial concessions. Only if that is agreed upon would the parties then discuss ending the war and security guarantees. Keane notes Putin has used negotiations for 6 months to delay and stall. Trump, having been briefed, is reportedly prepared to walk away from the summit unless a genuine ceasefire offer is on the table. I do not believe that Trump will be getting up and leaving the meeting the same as he left the G7, meeting. He will not be leaving Putin, sitting there and waiting for him and saying, hey, you didn't say what I expected you to say. I'm gone. Toodaloo. Trump will not be doing that. For him, he's excited to meet with Putin. He admires him. He likes him. If anything, Trump would be, conceding in some points. So, Bossman 48. Hey, the demon of Bakhmut, Ukrainian front line blogger reports Russian reconnaissance unit of approximately 500 soldiers that penetrated through the line have been wiped out. The enemy forces are contained. Let's see. This is one source. We need to see Ukrainian intelligence reports. I hope you're right. I truly do. So let's see. Now, according to the Telegraph, and now let's take this with a grain of salt. What we will be facing for the upcoming days up until the meeting between Trump and Putin is a lot of propaganda portraying Ukraine as very weak and ready to concede. We know that Telegraph specifically has played a major role to push Ukraine down. This is a fact. So they came up with another story saying that Ukraine may consider concessions on occupied regions amid war and NATO aspirations. And this is bogus, and I'll tell you why. So they say that Ukraine is reportedly prepared to make concessions. Such concessions could effectively freeze the front line and grant Russia control over contested regions, though the duration of such control is uncertain. Meanwhile, Russia continues to demand Ukraine's full capitulation, including blockade of NATO ambitions. Zelensky warned on Monday that there are no signs Russia is preparing for peace. Rather, intelligence reports indicate Russia is redeploying forces for new offensives. EU leaders are set to meet with Trump ahead of the summit with Putin. Now, why is this bogus? Because for Zelensky to say, I'm going to concede, I'm going to give up land or do land swaps or whatever in order to be able to join NATO is bogus, because NATO will not be, or cannot, by definition, accept a country that is split in part, that is partially occupied. NATO is a defense alliance. It cannot accept a country that is in the midst of a conflict. So for that reason, this whole article and this report by Telegraph is just bogus. And so this is part of this propaganda that will try to prepare this narrative that concessions would be, coming on Ukraine's side, even though Ukraine is a victim and has been aggressively invaded by murderous neighbor. So Zelensky spoke today to several leaders. He spoke to Erdogan, the Turkish president, and there he emphasized that peace negotiations excluding Ukraine will not lead to lasting solutions, and Turkey agreed. Why it matters? Because Turkey plays this double game. They try to be pro-EU, they try to be pro-Russia. Of course, they have access to Black Sea. Of course, in their interests, it's first and foremost important that Ukraine maintains its sovereignty and its borders, because, Turkey is right there. And so what happens to a neighbor can happen to anyone. So, and they don't want any escalation in the Black Sea area. And Turkey also is part of NATO, by the way. So they agreed, Zelensky and Erdogan, that a false sense of peace would only embolden further Russian aggression. Zelensky reiterated Ukraine's willingness to engage in any meeting format to end the war, while Erdogan confirmed Turkey's readiness to host a summit involving Ukraine, US, Russia, and Turkey. Well, Zelensky then held talks with the Prime Minister of Netherlands. He spoke to the President of Romania, and he spoke to the leader of Qatar. And this is according to press releases from Kiev. All of them essentially agreed to Zelensky's point that nothing should be decided on Ukraine without Ukraine present at the table. And this is important. Why? For Trump and Putin not to gain any friends of the idea, supporters of the idea that those land swaps should be happening and that Ukraine should be pushed into giving up its territory because it has been occupied. So for that reason, this is important. Now, what will happen next? And let me go further here because I want to jump. Tomorrow, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte will participate in a virtual meeting with European leaders, United States, and Ukraine. This is organized by German Chancellor Merz, and it will focus, of course, on the situation in Ukraine. So here, as I mentioned, European leaders and NATO, I have no trust in Rutte. So European leaders will try to talk sense into Trump, and again, push for idea that nothing should be decided about Ukraine without Ukraine present at any meeting. So what else? Okay, so in other news, Russian bomb factory under US and EU sanctions has obtained Siemens automation equipment through Chinese company that is playing sort of this middleman, right? Helping Russia to avoid sanctions, European and American sanctions, and so circumventing export bans. Reuters reports that Chinese supplier claimed Siemens doesn't ask for who the end user is, enabling the aid, right, the military aid to reach the Baiska oleum factory despite restrictions. In 2022, the factory's parent company also sanctioned ordered Siemens devices through a Russian middleman, with Chinese firms shipping the technology. This equipment automates explosive production, increasing output while reducing labor needs, a crucial advantage amid Russia's defense workforce strategies. And so I have the full readout in your newsletter today, which will come as soon as I'm done here. Read about it. I think it's on European and American side to control what Siemens does. And if in fact Siemens is not asking who the end user is, why don't they? And so I promised to talk a bit more about Europe and Europe's historic rearmament. So the Financial Times reports that Europe is preparing for war through an unprecedented rearmament effort. Since the Ukraine conflict began, well, let's call it a war, EU military production facilities have expanded 3 times faster than during peacetime, now covering over 7 million square meters of new industrial space. Yes and no. Financial Times says that Europe is preparing for war. That is the major sign. It is a sign that Europe needs equipment, right? Is it? Well, Ukraine needs equipment too. And at this point, Europe buying stuff from US to give to Ukraine is very much slowed down. As what we know, the next 3 to 10 Patriots that will be purchased by Germany will be arriving in Ukraine, in spring 2026. This is the earliest date given. So for that reason, Europe does understand which game Trump is playing. And so for that, they are, of course, increasing their production efforts, which is very important for Europe itself. I do not think that this is something that indicates that Europe is preparing for war. Europe is at war. Ukraine is in the heart of Europe. And if this invasion were to expand to the Baltics, to Moldova and whatnot, of course it will require more equipment. So Europe is actually doing the right thing here. Now, they say analysis of construction projects shows significant growth in sites producing ammunition and missiles, 2 critical bottlenecks in Western support for Ukraine. Yes, about 1/3 of surveyed military industrial sites show signs of expansion or new construction. Again, as for me, I analyze it as it leads to more support for Ukraine independently from the US, which makes total sense. A major example is a joint venture between German defense giant Rheinmetall and Hungary's state-owned N7 holding, which recently opened a large facility in Varpalota, Western Hungary, dedicated to manufacturing ammunition and explosives, underscoring Europe's ramped-up defense production. Now, this is a tricky one because, Orban and Hungary are very much pro-Russia. What game they will be playing, either European Union tries to make it beneficial and profitable for Hungary to play on the good side, right, while making money, or they're sort of, playing this tricky game where Hungary can, do something that Europe does not account for. So, also in other news, we know that the Zaporizhia nuclear plant is partially occupied, right, and controlled by Russians. So smoke has been spotted near a cargo facility at the Russian-controlled Zaporizhia nuclear power plant in southern Ukraine. The Ukrainian Energy Ministry stated that the fire's location and consequences are still being evaluated, noting that the cargo part is outside the plant's protected perimeter. This incident highlights the ongoing risks posed by Russia's occupation of Europe's largest nuclear facility. And why did I say it's partially controlled by Russia? Because yes, at this point, they were giving some access to International Atomic Energy, right, the IAEA, that regularly is monitoring the situation. The Zaporizhia plant has been under Russian control since February 2022, while the nearby city remains under Ukrainian control. And again, is Russia trying to provoke Ukraine to, concede and start having negotiations? Because if this Zaporizhia plant were to have issues, let's put it this way, that would be way worse than what we have experienced before, affecting entire Europe. So, speaking of fires and Europe, a severe wildfire is advancing toward Madrid, prompting Spain to convene a special committee meeting to address the crisis. The fires have reached the outskirts of the capital, notably affecting the suburb Tres Cantos, where several homes have burned. Firefighters have so far managed to contain the blaze in that area, and yesterday the flames destroyed Las Medulas, a UNESCO World Heritage Site known for its ancient Roman gold mining heritage. And wildfires are also spreading across neighboring Portugal, intensifying the regional emergency. And so, again, hello, climate change, and hello, us being unprepared and reckless, partially. So, this is happening in Europe. If you are there, I hope you're staying safe. Please evacuate when it's set, when you are informed to do so, because we know it in the United States, it's nothing to play around or be smarter than what your national service is, weather service is advising you to do. So please be safe. Now, let's talk a bit about national news. So Trump's big beautiful bill, big ugly bill that he signed last month, we knew that it will be affecting people. It will be affecting people relying on aid, on federal aid. And so this is projected to cause 2.4 million people, including families with children, to lose their food stamp benefits, according to Congressional Budget Office analysis. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the so-called SNAP, has traditionally required able-bodied adults to work for benefits beyond 3 months. Now, for the first time, parents of dependent children over 14 years old must work, volunteer, or attend job training at least 80 hours per month to qualify. And adults between 55 to 64 years of age, veterans, homeless individuals, and former foster youth are also now subject to mandate. Other recipients may see reduced monthly benefits. And so this, again, will be affecting 2.4 million people. If you have children that are dependent on your care 24/7, will this allow you to work 80 hours a week? Will this allow you to volunteer, right? That doesn't even bring you money. Meanwhile, you are also getting less benefits and less money, literally, on your SNAP card. So, but people voted for it, at least the representatives of the GOP. Now, another news, a gunman opened fire Monday afternoon in a Target parking lot in Austin, Texas, killing at least 3 people, including a child. 2 victims died on the scene, and third died later at a hospital. A 4th person was treated for injuries unrelated to gunfire. Police say the suspect stole a car, crashed it, then hijacked another vehicle from nearby dealership before being arrested about 20 miles away. Described as a white man in his 30s with mental issues. This incident, of course, is facing investigation. It is pending, and the incident also follows a stabbing attack 2 weeks earlier at a Michigan Walmart parking lot that we discussed in that time. Now, as we know, Trump was not happy with the job reports, right, with the statistics, and he wants manipulated statistics that are speaking in favor of everything he does, although it doesn't make sense. So he has nominated a new labor statistics bureau lead. This guy comes from Heritage Foundation. He is a known critic of the former head of Labor Statistics Bureau. This is E.J. Anthony. He will be heading the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Anthony, affiliated with conservative think tanks, Heritage Foundation, has publicly criticized the agency's data methods and its former commissioner, Erica McEntarfer, can see how well, calling her incompetent on Steve Bannon's podcast the day the July employment report was released. And I guess this is, in Trump's eyes, what qualified him, right? Anthony's nomination requires Senate confirmation. So, but until then, they are releasing new data on Friday. So, now, remember a week ago or so, we heard about this major breach of federal court filing system where folks have gained access to the cases, to all the data, also to highly sensitive information altogether, court documents and everything, right? Then about, well, maybe 3 days ago, we heard that this probably is China behind it. Now, evidence uncovered by investigators suggests that Russia was at least partially involved in a recent cyber attack on computer system used to manage federal courts documents, including highly sensitive information. Now, guess. I'll give you one guess. Will Trump bring it up in his meeting with Putin? You guess. Okay, let's just cruise through some quick headlines. U.S. immigration detention record. So more than 60,000 people are currently held in U.S. immigration detention, according to ICE records. This breaks a modern record previously set during the first Trump administration. And my question is, out of those 60,000 people, how many actually deserve to be there? Can we get this data? Will anybody ask? I'm not in this goddamn White House. Ask this question. Stop celebrating the numbers and tooting anybody's horn. Out of those 60,000 people who are criminally charged, who entered illegally, who overstayed their welcome, why are they here? Out of those 60,000 people, who deserve to be there? And have they even had a chance to due process? Have they had a chance to speak to a lawyer? Did anybody look at their documents? Or were they tricked to come for a meeting to federal office or USCIS, our immigration system, or to a court meeting or whatever? And then they were detained while they were entering the building, because that happened in New York City a lot. We've seen it on videos. It happens everywhere across the United States. So out of those 60,000 people, who deserves to be there and why? We're looking for this data. Now, an explosion at a U.S. steel facility in Pennsylvania killed 2 people and injured at least 10 others, authorities have reported. We continue with the fast news. Trump's Alaska summit. Well, ahead of his meeting with Putin in Alaska on Friday, Trump said he's willing to walk away from talks and let the conflict continue if no deal is reached. Ukraine's concerns on peace talks. Ukraine fears Putin may convince Trump to view Ukraine rather than Russia as the obstacle to peace. It already happened. It's not news. Now, a Russian missile killed at least a dozen foreign recruits at a Ukrainian military training camp last month, hitting a mass hole during lunchtime, according to soldiers familiar with the incident. Now, this data just came out today. Now, on Space Force, on August 12th, the U.S. Space Force aims to achieve 2 milestones. Its first launch using the new Vulcan Centaur rocket and the first launch of an experimental navigation satellite in nearly 50 years. Continued news. B-1B Lancer bomber is in Norway. America's only supersonic bomber, the B-1B Lancer, arrived in Norway on August 9th to train with European allies as part of a bomber task force to strengthen military cooperation. Now, by year's end, some U.S. Special Operations Forces will begin using new wearable technology that monitors vital signs in real time and alerts command posts if the wearer is exposed to hazardous gases or chemicals. This is great. It's been tested by U.S. Army. Now, U.S. Transportation Command activity. The command manages hundreds of airlift sorties over 15 ships, 10 commercial tankers, more than 1,000 freight shipments, 2,000 plus rail cars en route, and 10 patients, in air evacuations daily. So, as to National Guard in Washington, D.C., I told you earlier, 800 troops have been, National Guard troops have been allocated to turn Washington, D.C. in something safe and beautiful, or actually more of a fascist regime city, or city under fascist regime. Now, North Korea's spy satellite launch site has caused some concerns. North Korea has accelerated construction of a launch site for spy satellites, including building a seaport that may facilitate deliveries of new components from Russia. Of course, North Korea is helping Russia with soldiers, right? They're entered the meat grinder, but they're also are getting something in return, and that something is intelligence, and that something are parts that are needed to advance North Korea's capabilities. Well, lastly, on this quick news segment, UFC at the White House. Remember, Trump was tooting his horn that there will be UFC fight at the White House. Well, now UFC CEO Dana White, that beats his wife, set a fight night event at the White House on the 4th of July next year is absolutely going to happen. He scheduled a meeting with Donald Trump and Ivanka Trump that we will be co-producing this event for the next 4th of July, and they will be meeting later this month in Washington, D.C. Your comments. Jared says, it's almost as if they think, who's the worst person we can find for the job? You hire, right? Because if you think about it, Jared and everyone, if the intention is to destroy, then this type of person is golden. And I think it just points to that intention at this point. Steven says, people from other countries who are here legally, such as asylum seekers, will no longer have access to SNAP. Yes, you're absolutely right. Now, in some global news, let's talk about Israel. Families of Israeli hostages held hostage since October 7th, 2023. Trying to read and talk, and it doesn't work. So, families of the hostages, they are calling upon Netanyahu to stop the war. Netanyahu announced that he will be expanding this operation to seize full Gaza. He says nothing should be stopping Israeli forces. Their national committee has voted in favor of this, allowing him to pursue this. Now, the families, and regardless where they end up politically, they're calling on Netanyahu to stop this because this will only provoke Hamas to kill those hostages that have survived up until now. So, well, the strike that Netanyahu is planning will be supported by this October 7th council that he created, representing families of fallen soldiers, along with hundreds of companies and thousands of citizens planning to take the day off. Okay, let's recap. Netanyahu's council is in favor of this operation. The families of hostages held and the victims of October 7th are calling to put a stop on it, and they're planning to protest. That is what's happening. Now, meanwhile, Australia has announced plans to recognize a Palestinian state at the upcoming UN General Assembly in September. As I reported yesterday, New Zealand's foreign minister has also indicated that his country is considering recognition. These moves mark growing diplomatic shifts, leaving the US increasingly isolated from some of its closest allies on the Israel-Palestine issue. Now, Netanyahu probably, we saw it, promised Trump Gaza to Trump. So, yes, we are isolated in more ways than one. Israel is one of the examples. We're isolated when it comes to trade, right? Because we're trying to screw everybody. And most important, citizens and buyers and importers. We are also isolating ourselves because we are screwing our allies when it comes to our obligation to NATO, to when it comes to trade, but also when it comes to climate change, when it comes to our responsibility to help developing nations. This USAID, right? USAID or USAID, however you call it, both works. Being dismantled has left our allies and those who depend on us, just alone, without any help. And Yesterday I reported on, folks asking United States to help fight diseases, asking for $130 million, saying we will find ways, just give us money to do so if you are unable to provide medicine to us and help us physically. But United States is not doing that because this is none of our interest, right? The Trump administration clearly stated we're putting America first, meaning Trump first, his own personal interests first, his own gains first, his own business deals, and egoistically speaking, enrichment first. And if you think about it from this angle, right, as much as what we said to Jared's comment as to, selecting these people that are worst candidates for the job and then gifting them these positions, if you think about it from the angle of destroying what has been, dismantling the system, and just monetizing the pieces, the bits and pieces that remain, then all of this suddenly makes sense. The question is, what will be done against it, to prohibit it, to slow it down, right? We see Democratic leaders postponing votes, delaying, right? We see Newsom speaking out. We see today Carolyn Levitt saying, bring it on, Gavin, right? Who are you to call him Gavin, first of all? He is Governor Newsom. But we see this sort of, public we see this fight on public display, but do we see anything behind the scenes? Something that is done to stop Trump? Is there a way to stop him? Because he managed to put himself in the center of everything, right? Pretty much gaining control over all branches of the government, as much as also Supreme Court. So in this sense, without blaming Democratic leaders or the opposition or our international allies, what can be done truly and really, given the type of power that Trump managed to build up, right, within this 6 months? Yes, he's doing everything according to the Project 2025 plan, but I think he's also stepping outside of it, right? When it comes to global relations, international relations, there was, there were segments mentioning that we're not interested in trade organizations, we're not interested in climate change, we're not interested in UN should be dismantled, is the waste of real estate. They were mentioning NATO and making allies pay up. But I think at this point we're going beyond, because we're breaking the trust, we're breaking our image. And as you work years and decades to build up your image, and it takes one deed to break it. So at this point, how far are we, right? So the US and China, as I mentioned, agreed to extend the 90-day tariff pause that's supposed to end today. Trump signed an executive order extending this till November 10th, 2025. This extension was announced just before the previous pause ended. Both sides expressed satisfaction with the talks. Biden. Trump described his relationship with Chinese President Xi as very good, while Chinese embassy spokesperson called the tariff pause a win-win. Currently, U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods remain at 30%, and Chinese tariffs on U.S. goods stand at 10%, down from peaks at 145 and 125% in April. China also announced a postponement of some trade and investment restrictions on U.S. companies originally set for April. The latest extension followed bilateral talks in Sweden last month, where issues such as restoring China's rare earth exports were discussed, though this process remains incomplete, according to U.S. Trade Representative Greer. Looking ahead, Trump indicated he might meet Xi before year's end if a deal is reached. And I think that is his main intention. He's very much interested in the optics of meeting Putin and meeting Xi. He's not able to meet them both together because, remember, he was advocating for meeting Putin in China, making it a whole big hoopla. But that relationship between Putin and Xi is very close. They're not going to let Trump step in it or even get this photo up. So if Xi will be meeting Trump, that would result only if Trump were to go full-blown taco and just dismantle all the tariffs that he wanted to set upon Chinese imports to get this meeting, to win it, right? To buy it, essentially. So we'll see what will happen. Now, as to trade deals, Indonesia and Peru signed a trade agreement aimed at increasing market access for each other's goods during Peruvian President Dina Boluarte's visit to Jakarta. The negotiations took 14 months to complete. Last year, Indonesia exported approximately $331 million worth of goods to Peru, while Peru's exports to Indonesia totaled $150 million. Indonesia also expressed its interest in joining the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, the so-called CPTPP, of which Peru is already a member. So, and this is, the example, one of the examples where when we lose trade partners, others are building reliable trade relations, economic relations, defense alliances, where we will remain excluded, right? When we push Brazil away from us with a 50% on tariff on Brazilian imports, we push Lula essentially in the hands and in the hugs of Xi Jinping, because at this point, if they will not deal with US or deal less with US, they will have to be dealing with China, right? If we push China away, we push Xi closer to Putin. This is just the basic understanding on how economic relations work, because money has to be working in order to accumulate. So at this point, we're not doing anything that does make much sense. Now, other news, presidential hopeful Miguel Uribe in Colombia died in Bogota yesterday, 2 months after being shot at a campaign rally. While a shooter has been arrested, investigators have not announced a motive of the attack. The assassination attempt is reminiscent of the high levels of political violence Colombia experienced in 1980s and 1990s. So this was somebody who was, prognosed and seen as, winner of the election. As to Japan and Pakistan, they are building a cooperation in terms of currency. Japanese tech firm Soramitsu is working alongside the Japanese government, helping Pakistan's central bank to develop a digital currency for a pilot launch this year, according to Nikkei. One feature of the digital currency would allow users to send and receive money without internet access. If successful, this model could be applied in other countries. And this is huge, right? If you don't need any connection for it. Now, as to Armenia and Azerbaijan, they published now the full text of the deal that they signed at the Oval Office with Donald Trump. Both countries pledged to give up all claims to each other's territory, to cease using force against one another. The agreement also prohibits deploying third country troops on their shared border. But the deal has been initiated, but is not yet officially signed. So whatever they signed at the Oval Office was not the actual deal practically, because it is initiated, it is open for discussion, for negotiation. All they pledged is not to claim each other's land and bring third party into the fight. But there is no agreement among them, or they haven't signed it. It's just initiated. And as always, it's a lot of hoopla, and then we find out what the real deal is. In the reality, there is no deal. Right? Same as with the EU, same as with the UK, same as this Armenia, Azerbaijan. It's a lot of shit show and little, truth to it, or actually, it's always a concept of something, right? So, as to Iran, a senior official from International Atomic Energy Agency traveled to Iran yesterday for the first visit since Israel-Iran conflict began in June, and since U.S. bombed the nuclear facilities in Iran. Ahead of talks, Iranian officials stated that they will not permit inspections of their nuclear sites until a new cooperation framework with the UN nuclear watchdog is established. So essentially, he traveled there, was not let in to inspect anything, and Iran is asking UN to monitor it. So, as to Poland, they had elections, presidential election recently. Somebody who is very opposed to Ukraine, historically seen. So, but their prime minister Tusk, who is has more power, right, decisive power in Poland, is pro-Ukraine. So, and he remains in power. So it is sort of a bit of a limbo there. So now Polish authorities have expelled 57 Ukrainian nationals following riots that broke out during a concert by Belarusian rapper Max Korsh on August 9 at Warsaw's National Stadium. Over 100 individuals were detained by police in connection with the incident. Prime Minister Donald Tusk has warned against allowing the events to fuel anti-Ukraine sentiment in Poland. And he's absolutely right. Right? If you allow somebody from Belarus who is so in favor of Putin and everything that Putin does and is so against Ukraine, if you allow them to proceed with this huge concerts in Poland, where Ukrainians are living for years, working and paying tax and speaking the language at this point, yeah, that will cause riots. And so now you will detain these people that were protesting against this singer. Remember, just recently in Canada, the MAGA, some church, whatever singer was prohibited from holding his concert somewhere at a big venue in Montreal, and then he got permit to wanted to get a permit to perform at a church in Montreal, didn't get it, then still performed. It was either his team was detained or whatever. So all this caused this hoopla. But if you allow, artists that are, speaking out against your own interest and your own state to perform, then yes, it will lead to this. But expelling 57 Ukrainians, back to the war ridden Ukraine, that's a way to go. Well, and lastly, coming up, so today United Nations marks International Youth Day. If you're part of youth, congratulations. The UN Security Council debates the Middle East and Yemen in New York over the next few days. Tomorrow, I mentioned there's a big meeting on Ukraine where European Union leaders will try to talk sense into Trump. And also tomorrow, Typhoon Portal is expected to make landfall in Taiwan. So if you're there, stay safe, listen to what your local authorities are advising you to do. And I'm done. All right? Okay. Hey, Steven. Hello. So much shit show. Yes. Steven is covering White House. He's in DC. So he's knowing. Covering this Friday will be interesting. I think it should be somewhere in the middle of the night, right? Because they're going to go by Russian time zones. They're not going to wait for us. I think it will be around 4 a.m., right? Especially if they will be on a Russian island. That's what I guesstimate. Steven says people from other countries. Okay, I read it. And Jared says he got almost all permits for his shows revoked. Are you talking about this guy who is performing in Poland or the guy in Montreal? I think you're referring to the guy in Montreal. Yeah, the MAGA singer guy. Yeah, he got almost all permits for his shows revoked. Yes. I don't know who this was in Poland. Anyway. Okay, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow at noon, per usual. Today, it just in Canada. Yes, Jared. Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much for watching. See you tomorrow. Please like it, subscribe, whatever you need to do for others to see it. And then a newsletter in better English is coming very soon with the deep dives and everything that is pretty long. My apologies. But today is the day for a long newsletter. So sit down, grab a drink or whatever and read through it, because my intention is for you to be informed, to be able to make better decisions. Okay? Now, main thing, please distinguish between facts and the feelings, right? The fear-mongering, the aggressive rhetoric, and everything that you are being fed on social media, but also television, right? mainstream media. There's so much, whoo, everything will be horrible, and you will be seated at home, and you will be, scared shitlessly to exit and do something. Just those are some are facts. Most of it is bullshit. So take the bullshit out, pay attention to the facts, keep your head on a swivel, take care of you. This is a marathon. Nothing is going to end in a second, but you need to be here once all this is gone and normality is restored. But for that, you need to keep yourself upbeat and healthy. Okay? Promise me that? All right. So, see you tomorrow. Have a good night. And, yeah, stay safe.